Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode, this week's episode of the Multifamily Investing Academy's podcast. And I have a special guest here with me who, you would think is not really, the real estate kind of guy because of the topic that we're going to discuss today. But he actually is. And we're going to have we're going to start off with a conversation. But I want to introduce you to Nick Raithel. And Nick has a website called www.contentcorps.net. Now, what he does is he can write a book for you in 7 hours. Let me tell you something. And I'm going to share with him my experience and see how it compares with what he does. My experience with someone trying to get me to write a book, which I still have to do, which Nick is probably gonna win me over very easily here on today's podcast. But hey, Nick, how you doing?
Great to be here, Charles. Doing really well.
Thank you. And for those of you that are watching this on video, Nick has opted not to use the video. I guess he had a bad hair day or something, and he's chosen that today will be the day that he decides not to grace us with his beauty. So you will just be looking at me. And look at it. It says, hold on a second. Let me. Why does it always? Deb told me this before, that my name always appears as one of my former guests for some reason. But here I am. Okay, I'm officially Charles Dobbins now on my video. So Nick, all right, Nick. But before we get started, Nick had a very interesting point that he wanted to discuss before we got into the book writing topic. But he wants to share with all of us a strategy for how syndicators can avoid having their time wasted by passive investors that they meet at RIA clubs and other forums who are not actually serious about investing with them. And I thought that was a great little topic, a little off topic, which is fine. But this is what I teach my students all the time is you've got to understand the flavor of the investor's money right then and there. When they're talking about what they can invest, find out what it's going to take from them to say yes to being in your deal, because you got a lot of tire kickers out there who are going to waste your time. And so many times I have, and Nick, you may know this, but so many times I have students that come back from a RIA club event and like, oh, I found one guy who's got $100,000. I got another guy who's got $250,000. They're all going to invest with me. I said, really? Did you ask them the tough questions like what does a deal have to look like for you to write a check for $250,000? Oh no, I just got their business card. Yeah. Okay. Then fine. So Nick, tell us what your strategy is.
Sure. Well, this strategy actually ties into what we're going to be talking about today. And the strategy, to take away the suspense, not keep the listeners in too much more suspense here, is basically to put out a book or some other content piece to essentially become a screening device. And I'll give you guys an analogy for it. It's basically like, if you know any of the Japanese martial art of Aikido, where you use the opponent's strength and energy against them, a book, when you put it out there, you give it to the person and you're like, hey, I had a great meeting with you. Before we schedule a coffee outside of this RIA Club event, here's my book. Give it a read and look through it, and then shoot me an email and we can set something up. So you're basically taking the energy and all the happiness and hype from this investor and letting them carry themselves to the next step. And that's really where it comes in.
All right. That's cool. Because, you're vetting them first, or self-vetting them.
Exactly. Yeah. You're letting them really prove themselves. And certainly when you get someone, and you will have people who read your book all the way through and digest it, those are actually going to be even better prospects for you to be meeting with and talking syndications with.
Okay, so if you're using this strategy, what would you recommend the topic of the book be? What would have to be in that book to really do the self-vetting?
I think it's going to have a couple of things just from folks we've worked with in the past. One of the big things, of course, is going to be your experiences and your knowledge. It's going to have to show that you're knowledgeable. And to make this a little bit more specific for our listeners, some ways you could do that in the book would be having a section, for example, on how you do your due diligence. Like when you're walking that property, what are you looking for? What needs to be in those units that you're inspecting? What should definitely not be in those units you're inspecting? How you run the numbers, your thought process too. on what makes a good deal, what's not a good deal. Those would be on the side of proving your expertise. And then the other side would be humanizing yourself a little bit more and incorporating a little bit of your own, what we could term secret sauce, your background, your story that makes you different from everybody else who they just got business cards from at that RIA meeting.
Right. Good. All right, cool. All right, now let's get into the topic of Content Corps. You claim that you can get a book written of my life story in 7 hours.
Well, I would have to know your life story for starters, but
remember, Nick, I'm 72 years old, so there's a lot of stories in here.
Well, I hear 72, and we're talking 7-hour book. If you think about every 10 years is a chapter, that breaks down to a little bit 7.
The 30s would be several hours. It was a crazy decade. And third grade was my best year, so it's going to be a crazy story. But anyway, you got 7 hours. Okay, let me ask you this, because the way it works is you or your associate will interview me. We're going to use me as an example. So what we're going to be talking about is this whole podcast is about me getting my book written. So take me through the steps. I'm going to have like an initial 20-minute conversation with you. And if you go to his website, contentcorps.net, .com, I'm sorry, you can sign up for a 20-minute interview and then discuss what we are going to be discussing on this call right now directly with Nick or one of Nick's associates. Am I correct, Nick?
You're correct. And the website, just to get that again, it's .net at content.
Okay.
Contentcorps.net. Corps like the Marine Corps.
Well, that would be corpse. Our president calls it corpse, or our former president, Marine Corps, corpsman.
Fair enough.
This is about as political as we get in this phone call, Nick. So let's get this correct, because I got it wrong. Content Corps, C-O-R-P.
S.
C-O-R-P-R-S, or corpse.net. And I had it wrong. I said .com. I corrected myself incorrectly. So it's contentcorps.net. So they're going to come to this website. You've got an online form they can fill out to set up an appointment. And tell me what goes on in that 20-minute call.
Sure. On that call, we talk about, for starters, why they even want a book in the first place. Because one of the things that we find, and interestingly, this actually is kind of a good thing, is we'll talk to people and we'll find that they either just need to do some time blocking, some good quality time blocking out of Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, set aside some space to just do it themselves. So we find that sometimes. In other cases, we'll find that they don't actually need a book, that what they're looking to achieve from the book could actually be achieved through doubling down on Instagram, doubling down on Facebook ads, going to RIA meetings in the first place. Sometimes they just hide behind, I'm too busy after work. And what they really need to do is just make some time and go to those RIA meetings. So we work out that stuff initially, and assuming then that we find a book still makes sense for them and that they can't do it themselves, then from there what we'll do is we'll begin discussing their book idea, and the conversation will go from there.
Okay. How often do you actually, when you interview somebody who comes to you with a concept for the book that they want, by the end of the conversation, you guys have thrown out that idea and have come up with something entirely different? Because I'm thinking I'm going to show up on your doorstep and I already know the name of a book. I already know what we're going to do. But my guess is we might have a totally different concept.
Well, again, we would have to see the concept, but I will say it does happen. We definitely have had people where they come in not nearly as well developed as it sounds like your idea might be, but we have people who come in fairly well developed. We talk about what they're actually looking to achieve through the book, and we realize together by the end of the call that, you know what, we may need to pivot and go in a different direction.
Now, do you pivot because the person's idea stinks, or that you think you might be able to market it in a different way, or that story is not going to sell in Peoria? You really should tell this story. Like, I'm probably all those different reasons, but what is your objective when you're sitting down in this conversation? Is to, obviously you said, to figure out whether they want a book or not, or need a book. Let's say they do need the book. What is your typically the objective of having that book is for the person?
Sure, to figure out what is going to connect and resonate most with their readers. And even beyond just their readers, people who are going to be aware of the book. Because oftentimes, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, having a book in the first place is one of those things where people just look at you differently, even if they haven't read it. They just get that mantle of authorship and view you now as on some sort of pedestal just from having your book.
Okay, because that is how I came to this table, so to speak. I have a friend of mine who is in the single family business, teaching people how to do it. Guy's the best in the business. I can't say enough good things about him. Not only that, he's one of the nicest guys in the world. I just interviewed him on my podcast last week. He came to me when I first met him with his book. He had a book. I thought, shit, how did he do that? How did he get the book? And then he told me. And Nick, this is where we're going to talk about some inside baseball. We are going to talk about price with you, but at the end of the call. But I'm going to share some prices with you right now as to what was quoted to me. But let me tell you that the journey that I started down to get my book written, and it kind of came to an end because I just didn't hit it off with the group that we were working with. But this particular group, and I flew down to Charleston, South Carolina. Do I need to say more to you, Nick? Do you know who I'm talking about now?
I would think it's I think that's sort of sounding familiar.
Okay. So I flew down there to Charleston, South Carolina. I had an all-day meeting with these people where they laid out this whole, marketing program and stuff. And of course, everything comes back down to the book. And that's where they make their money. And now they talk about doing it very similarly to the way that you're doing it, where I would have a sense, you poo-poo the concept of ghostwriter on your website, but I'll use the term ghostwriter for lack of a better term, that I would spend like an hour a week on the phone with a particular copywriter or ghostwriter telling them my story, and then they would put the book together. And at the end, I would have my own book. I'd have to go out, and we're going to talk about publishing after before we get off, but I would have the whole document done for the low price of, take a guess, Nick.
Probably about $40,000.
$35,000. Yep. You're spot on. You're in the neighborhood. $35,000 what I would have to pay to have all of this stuff done. And, I was willing to pay it. I was ready to go. I was ready to write the check, but I thought, geez, there's just got to be some, it just feels like I'm just, one of the things that drove me crazy was the salesperson kept pushing me like they had to get a quota done. Oh, you better sign up before this time. And I'm thinking to myself, when I walked through their office, they had all these charts on the wall talking about how, how much more they had to go to hit their company's annual goal. I'm like, then she starts pounding me, trying to get me. I'm like, listen, I'm not going by your schedule. I mean, I'll go when I'm good and ready. And so that kind of ended my discussions with these folks. But and then of course, life goes on. I'm still sitting here, Nick, without a book. So I contact you. We do the 20-minute conversation. We come to the conclusion that I want a book. I need a book. And what is our next step for us, you and me?
Sure. Our next step in that case would probably be to map out some sort of a long-term timeline, along with really getting clear on what the structure of the book was going to be, drilling down into that. And I will say on that latter point, oftentimes we'll have people who all they have is a napkin with a cocktail napkin or some loose scribbling. So our next step really would involve taking everything off the napkin, hopefully if the napkin was still intact, hadn't gotten wet, and putting it into some sort of an outline, getting clear on both our sides about that, and then proceeding from there.
My cocktail napkins never get wet, Nick. Don't spill a drop of my Manhattan. That's for sure. All right. So we do this. Now, listen, I have a better idea, Nick. I have a better idea. And see if you like this idea. Instead of me sitting down there and talking to you for an hour at a time, I've got a membership platform that I've got close to close to 1,000 hours of content videos where I'm teaching people how to buy apartment complexes. And that's the name of our book, essentially. Wouldn't it be easier for me just to give you a username and password into my platform and you just go watch as much as you want and pull out the kernels?
Well, it's funny you would mention that because we do occasionally do what we term hybrid arrangements, which is where someone already has tremendous, like we did it, for example, with a wholesaler. And I can't really give the name, obviously,
Yeah.
but he had a very, by my take, great marketing system where he used these videos and he had this whole sequence educating people and leading them down into his funnel for a coaching program. Really cool guy, really successful. And in his case, we did the calls a little bit abbreviated because he already had the concepts, but the calls were designed to piece together the missing pieces, connect the dots with questions and things we were curious about from watching his videos. But his videos did form the bulk of the material we were already working from.
Interesting. First off, I'm wondering like who this guy is. I wonder if it's the guy I was just talking about because he, I think he's coming out with more books, and he is a wholesaler and he's got a great coaching program. But I'm not going to put you in the spot. So anyway, all right. So we go through this. How long? You say 7 hours. I mean, and an hour over 7 periods. Let me ask you, who am I speaking with when we have this conversation for the next 7 hours?
Sure, that's going to depend on who we have available at that point. I will say that for projects that I personally find particularly cool, I try to be in a position to talk with the people. I mean, I like it.
And of course, that would include me, Nick.
Yeah, certainly. But yeah, that's just.
Nick has been, for those of you listening at home, before we got online, Nick has been sucking up to me since the moment he got on the call, telling me how incredibly good looking I am. Right, Nick?
Absolutely wrong. No.
Yeah. I tried. Go on with it. So hopefully it's you, but who else could it be? Like how do you choose people to work with?
Sure. So I choose people who are good people with people skills. I think that's certainly important. People who can follow directions and learn our process and learn the kind of questions to be asking. That's another one. And then also people, and I think this is good in terms of the soft skills, people who just show up on time. It seems silly to even say that, but with technology providing convenient excuses for people not to be on time, like, oh, my computer snagged and that was why it didn't load, things like that. I think it's important to hire people who really are straight shooters when it comes to showing up on time, doing what they say they're going to do. So that's another huge area that we look at.
And do these people do you have some people that are, their specialties more real estate, and then some people are specialties more home service, or that type of thing?
No, we haven't specialized in that direction.
Okay. So it's really just anybody that can take the story and kernelize it down into a narrative.
Yeah, that's definitely right.
Okay. All right. So you connect me with a, and what do you call them? I said ghostwriter. What do you like to call them?
No, we really, that's a good question. We don't term it ghostwriters. It's more just like people in the office. I mean, that might be, or people on our team. I mean,
yeah. Okay.
I don't know if we have our own Starbucks style lingo for it yet.
Gee, that's the second time Starbucks has been referenced as an adjective on my podcast in the last 2 hours. So that's I'm gonna have to figure out how to use that. So, but all right. So I find the right person. We get connected. I go through is it really going to be 7 hours? Could it be longer? Could it be shorter? What's the usual?
Sure. So to be clear on the 7 hour part, It's 7 hours of your time. On our side, creating the book,
Right.
we are spending substantially longer than 7 hours. I
Right.
mean, I don't think you could create a book of really any substance in terms of what the people are looking to achieve and basically being a quote real book, period, in just 7 hours. So on our side, we're spending
Yeah.
substantially more. With respect to the people we work with, they only spend those 7 hour calls. So they're only spending a total of 7 hours on their side, and we're handling all of the rest.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So, and I kind of would think that if we were going to work together, that we can do those calls, and I like that hybrid idea that you have because, geez, why do you need me to sit there for 7 hours talk to you? Everything I do has been recorded since day one and put up in the archives, and I can direct you to some great stuff. So, I'm picturing one of your office workers sitting there going through my videos. Because I'll tell you, one of the videos that explains everything is about a 5 hour long video. And then we'd be spending that time watching that video. That would dig into my 7 hours.
Bring the popcorn.
Yeah, exactly. Hold my beer. Okay, so we get this book done, or you guys. What do you then at the end of the 7 hours? How long does it take you to get me back was it just a first draft or what's the process?
We're doing the book simultaneously. So after the first call, the way we try to set it up is that we'll structure each of the calls to focus on a section of the book.
Okay.
So, for example, we like to have a common framework that we often work from is having, say, the 5 core concepts. These might be your 5 pillars of multifamily investing. So the 5 big ideas that you're communicating to your readers. Those 5 would be in our middle section of the calls. Then our first call would be the introduction, laying the groundwork for the project. Then the 7th call would be the conclusion and beginning to discuss marketing strategies, cover design, things like that. With those middle 5, again, being our core 5 chapters in the center of the book.
Okay. Oh, that's really cool. So, very shortly thereafter, throughout the whole process, I've been seeing the content come to life. Let's talk about that marketing and the getting the thing produced, because that is, I remember when I was talking to those folks down in South Carolina, that was one of the things that, that's when the real costs started coming into play. But also, that's the part that kind of I felt was the most intimidating. I'll have your help, putting the whole book together. That's your job. But now I've got to start producing this book. So what do I do?
Sure. At that point, what we'll do is typically we help out with the formatting, we help out with getting it together, and then we will refer you to one of our partners who actually is a printer and a publisher in that sense.
Excellent. Okay.
And with that, we're not just going to turn you loose. We'll make sure that the person is vetted and is proper and also fits within your own criteria and budget. Because quite frankly, many of the printers and publishers out there, their rates can vary. So we really try to help find someone who is on your level with what you want and with what you're able to go after.
All right. Now, I have one thing you talk about formatting and that is really kind of how I envision my book is going to look. Is there going to be sections within sections? Like, I'm going to tell a story about a particular thing that happened to me when I owned a particular property, and it's kind of like a cutout from the rest of the story. It's like an aside, so to speak, sidebar of what we're talking about in the chapter. So your team would set up that type of formatting. You'd have that type of I don't know what you guys call that, when maybe it's like broken out in a different shaded section. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the shaded part you just mentioned is exactly what I'm picturing as well.
Yeah.
So kind of a special note or did you know sort of thing, going back to textbooks.
Yeah. And so you guys will do that type of formatting, or does the publisher do that?
That would be A publisher might handle it, but we would probably focus on that as well.
Okay. Okay. Good. Now tell me something. One of the things that that you need to understand when you finally publish your book and you have that thing in your hand is how do you get it out to everyone else? And I've seen, obviously, from all these gurus out there that are teaching, I've seen how they get their book out there. Like, oh, just pay the shipping and handling, and I'll get you my free book. Or, if you sign up for that, I'll give you this. Do you help with that marketing push or teaching me how to do that?
We absolutely do. And what you just referenced is a strategy that's very popular, free plus shipping. I believe it was originated by Frank Kern. I think that was the one.
Yeah.
Or Russell Brunson. They sort of came out with it first.
You know what?
It's gotten popular.
Yeah, Russell Brunson. I got his book. Probably kicking around here right now, and I got it exactly that way. But let me tell you something. I bet you Frank Kern taught Russell Brunson how to do it.
I would think that's pretty fair too.
Yeah.
Frank's a little bit older than Russell, to put it gently.
Exactly. Yeah. I think Frank invented everything. That guy's amazing. So.
Well, Russell actually took it, from my knowledge, one step further and was actually sending people a CD player or an MP3 player with his content. So that's changing the game even more. That probably cost him about $20 per lead.
Yeah, I didn't. I came after that time. I didn't get that offer. But have you been to Russell's conferences?
Haven't had that pleasure yet.
Okay, I went down to Orlando. My assistant and I went down to Orlando and watched Russell. Great guy, nicest guy in the world. Unbelievable expert when it comes to marketing. And I got to tell you that my question to you about that promotion ties back to how I watched him do it. And, how he gave away that free book. And I actually think he has some, because I'm on that platform of his where he's got the whole funnel built out for giving away the free book, plus shipping and handling.
Yeah, he's done a great job. I think he's, if I remember correctly, a disciple originally of Dan Kennedy or some of those really old guys. Because I've heard him term the new Dan Kennedy or younger Dan Kennedy.
Oh,
not as rough.
Yeah, no, you know what? You're right. I think he was actually like in the inner circle, the Glazier Kennedy inner circle. But he also, is it Mitch Abrams? Is that the name? Is that the big marketing name? I have that book at home. But I think he's also a protege of Mitch Abrams. I think Mitch Abrams is like the expert on marketing. Everybody goes back to Mitch Abrams. So, but yeah. So anyway, we're not really getting off track here because this is the most important aspect of writing the book. The last thing you want to do is have 1,000 copies of your book sitting in your garage. You got to get them out there or it's meaningless. So your team will help with this particular aspect of the deal.
Yes, we will. And I will say in some cases, we're actually fortunate enough to have people we're working with who already have a marketing framework in place.
Awesome.
That we can then go with. And that wholesaler guy I mentioned in our earlier example would be one. We also have people with educational platforms that may not be as well developed, but they do have assistance. And so from there, what we're really doing is we're kind of standing and guiding them as opposed to actually creating fresh materials, mapping out in-depth strategies. We're really just taking them from the book to apply it to what they already have. But beyond that, though, there are certainly plenty of cases where people don't have that infrastructure in place. And for them, we're crafting much more custom strategies to help them really get that book out there. So it's not, to paraphrase the much overused cliche, it's not the book falling and no one hears it because no one's around.
Exactly. That's my biggest fear. So like my biggest fear is that I give them out as Christmas presents for the next 20 years to my family. So that's the last thing I want.
Well, I don't think that if you marketed it correctly and properly, you'd be in too much danger of that. Although that might be a good thing to prop up the Christmas tree with if you have a stack of books and
exactly
it's looking a little small.
Exactly. I'll have them all gift wrapped. Hey, Nick, where are you located?
Sure, based out west.
Wait, okay. So I'm getting you up early today, aren't I?
You are. But I am
I
on that miracle morning Hal Elrod kick where
Oh,
it's
geez,
all about
yes.
getting your energy in the morning.
Good for you, man. You're a protege of books. I can tell. I can tell because I have that book too.
Well,
Um,
books are kind of, I forget who said it originally, the levers to transformation or to reinvention. Does that quote ring a bell? I know I've
no,
heard it from one of those personal development guys.
I never said that. That was not me. Don't even attribute that to me, Nick. That's heavy stuff. That's heavy. So no, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I am constant, and I do a lot of audible.com because I'm in the car so much, but that is you can never get enough. There's so much great stuff out there. I interviewed a guy the other day. No, I son of a gun, I didn't even interview him for a podcast. I'm going to do a webinar with him coming up. But man, he and I were going back and forth on great books. And that was a lot of fun. I wish I had recorded that call because that would have been a great call to put out there. Hopefully, we'll be able to recreate it for our webinar. But all right, let's talk about money. How does your organization work? How do your payments work? What can we do?
Sure. The payments typically are split out into installments. We're not going to be like the friend you mentioned down south. We're not going to be asking
Thank
for
you.
a 30K up front and no guarantees. We're not going to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, okay, so it's broken out, and this is all going to be spelled out once we do our 20-minute interview with you. This is what we can do.
It's going to depend. We don't like to rush into anything in fairness to the person and just in fairness to the size of the project. I mean, we really treat this, I don't want to use another cliche like marriage, but it is a pretty serious partnership that we enter into.
Yeah.
And we view it that way in creating it.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Nick. I am going to fill out your form today, and I'll fill it out. It's almost going to be noon here in my time, and by 8:00 tonight, everyone is listening, I will have my book completed. How's that sound, Nick? You on?
Well, I think it sounds like something that, in fairness, we couldn't deliver. I mean, we don't do a book in a day.
I know. No, but I tell you, I've got to do this, and I like you. You're going right down my alley. You're saying all the right things, and I want to be your next client, Nick. So for those of you listening at home, hopefully by the time this podcast airs, or even whenever you listen to it, you will hear that Nick and I have succeeded in putting my book together. And man, what we should do is advertise it right now for shipping and handling. Send me an email, and I'll send you a copy of my book that Nick and I did. How's that? How's that for putting the fire under my fanny and making me have to achieve that goal? That's a good. I like this. This is good.
Well, don't want to put you on the spot. And I would also encourage you, like all of our listeners who are hearing this right now, that anyone can hear a podcast and get the word book in their head, but it really comes down to taking that step back, doing a little bit of soul searching, and determining, does this really make sense? Yeah. And if it does, great. But if it doesn't, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and nothing wrong with pursuing another channel beyond books.
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to figure that out in my 20-minute phone call with you once I complete the form on your website, www.contentcorps.net, corps.net. So, hey, Nick, go back to bed. I'm done here. I'm going to be your next new client, and I'm looking forward to really getting this thing done, because I'll tell you something. It's been something, and I'll be very curious to see if you can talk me out of it. But it's been something that I've been wanting to do for years, and just I need that kick in the fanny. I need to get this thing done.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes then.
Yeah, that'll be fun. All right, his name is Nick Raithel. Did I say that right? Raithel.
Got it.
Nick Raithel. Nick, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope you and I work together closely coming up.
Been a pleasure as well, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.